"Why did you kill him for me?" she asked. The mafia boss replied, "Because he touched what's mine." The rain in Gray Harbor did not wash the city clean. It only made the grime slicker, reflecting the neon signs of the corporate towers that pierced the heavy cloud cover like needles of light. Down here, on the pavement, the city smelled of wet asphalt, old exhaust, and the salt coming off the dark, churning water of the harbor. Emma Romano pulled her coat tighter around herself as she stepped out of the narrow brick building that housed the law offices of Miller and Vance. Her shoulders ached. She had spent 9 hours staring at contracts, filing motions, and fetching coffee for attorneys who billed more in an hour than she made in a week. Now, as the clock tower struck 6 in the evening, her second life was just beginning. She was 30 years old, and she was tired. It was a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep could not fix because sleep did not pay the bills. She walked briskly toward the subway station, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the sidewalk. She did not look at the shadows in the alleyways. In Gray Harbor, you learned early to keep your eyes forward. This was a city built on 2 things: old money and new blood. The corporate towers held the money, but everyone knew who held the blood. The Costa Syndicate did not advertise, but their presence was as heavy and pervasive as the fog rolling in off the waterfront. They owned the unions, they owned the shipping lines, and, as Emma knew all too well, they owned the night. Her destination was Veritas, an upscale lounge and bar located in the Velvet Rope district of the city. It was a place of dark mahogany, crushed velvet and crystal tumblers, where the city's elite went to pretend they were civilized while making deals that would ruin lesser men. Emma worked there 4 nights a week to chip away at the mountain of debt that sat on her chest like a stone. Between her student loans and her mother's escalating medical treatments for a heart condition that insurance refused to fully cover, Emma had no choice but to trade sleep for tips. The shift started like any other. The air inside Veritas was cool and smelled of expensive scotch and cedarwood. The lighting was low, designed to make everyone look beautiful and dangerous. Emma tied her apron, smoothed her hair back, and stepped behind the long, polished bar. It was 11 o'clock when the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound, it was a silence. The low hum of conversation dropped, rippling outward from the entrance like a wave. Emma looked up from the martini she was stirring. Adrian Costa had walked in. She had seen him before, of course. He was the owner, though his name appeared on no official paperwork. Usually. He was a silhouette on the mezzanine level, a ghost watching his kingdom. Tonight, he was on the floor. He moved with a fluid, predatory grace that made the other men in the room look clumsy. He was flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked like they were carved from granite, but Adrian needed no protection. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, highlighting the breadth of his shoulders and the lean power of his frame. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was too hard to be classically handsome, but too arresting to look away from. He moved toward the private corner booth, the one reserved permanently for him. As he passed the bar, he paused. Emma froze, the silver shaker cold against her palm. Adrian turned his head slowly. His eyes met hers. They were dark, intelligent, and terrifyingly calm. For a second, the noise of the bar faded into a dull roar. He didn't smile. He didn't leer. He just looked at her. An assessment that felt like it stripped away her defenses and saw the exhaustion and the fear she kept hidden beneath her professional veneer. Intimidation flooded her veins, cold and sharp. This was a man who could order a death as easily as he ordered a whiskey. Yet, beneath the fear, there was something else. A strange, inexplicable sense of safety. As long as his eyes were on her, it felt as if nothing else in the room dared to move. Then he nodded, a microscopic acknowledgement, and continued to his table. Emma let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Her hands were trembling slightly as she poured the martini. She told herself it was just the caffeine. It was just the stress. An hour later, the bar was at capacity. Emma was running on adrenaline, moving cases of wine from the back storage room to the front. The hallway behind the bar was narrow, dim, and smelled of cardboard and cleaning supplies. It was the unglamorous artery of the luxury establishment. She pushed open the heavy steel door to the stockroom, balancing a crate of vodka on her hip. "Well, look who it is," a voice sneered from the shadows. Emma stopped, her heart slamming against her ribs. She knew that voice. It was the sound of her worst mistakes coming back to haunt her. Ryan Cole stepped out from behind a stack of kegs. He was wearing a leather jacket that creaked as he moved, and his eyes were glassy, pupils blown wide. He was handsome in a jagged, ruinous way, but the charm had worn off years ago, leaving only the rot underneath. He was a low-level enforcer for a crew that ran drugs on the South Side, a rival faction that nipped at the heels of the Costa Empire. "Ryan," Emma said, her voice tight, "you cannot be back here. If security sees you, let them see me." Ryan interrupted, stepping closer. He smelled of stale beer and aggression. "I came to see my girl. You have been ignoring my texts. Em? I do not like being ignored. I am not your girl," Emma said, clutching the crate like a shield. "We broke up 6 months ago. Get out of my way, Ryan." "I have work to do." She tried to brush past him, but he moved fast. He slapped the crate out of her hands. It crashed to the floor, bottles shattering, the smell of premium vodka filling the small space instantly. Before she could react, his hand shot out and wrapped around her wrist. His grip was bruising, a vice of bone and muscle. He yanked her toward him, slamming her back against the rough brick wall. Emma gasped, the air leaving her lungs. "You think you are too good for me now?" Ryan hissed, leaning in close. His face was inches from hers. "You think because you work in a place like this, serving drinks to the high rollers, that you are better than where you came from?" "Let go of me," Emma demanded, struggling. Her boots slipped on the wet floor. "You are hurting me." Ryan laughed, a low, ugly sound. "I will let go when I am ready. You need a reminder. Em, you need to remember who you belong to. You do not get to walk away from me. Not until I say so." He squeezed harder. Pain shot up her arm. Emma cried out, fear turning to panic. He was high, and he was angry. And they were alone in a soundproof hallway. I said let her go. The voice was not loud. It was soft, barely more than a murmur, but it carried a weight that made the air in the hallway turn to ice. Ryan froze. He turned his head, still keeping his grip on Emma's wrist. Adrian Costa stood at the end of the hallway. He was alone. His hands were in his pockets. He looked completely relaxed, which was the most terrifying thing Emma had ever seen. "This is private business. Costa?" Ryan spat, though his voice wavered. "Walk away." Adrian tilted his head slightly, as if he were observing a mildly interesting insect. "You are in my establishment," Adrian said. "You are breaking my inventory. And you are touching my staff." He took a step forward, then another. Ryan released Emma and spun to face him, reaching for his waistband where Emma knew he kept a knife. He never got the chance. Adrian moved faster than humanly possible. One moment he was 5 feet away. The next, he was a blur of motion. He didn't strike Ryan, he simply dismantled him. Adrian's hand shot out, clamping around Ryan's throat with effortless, terrifying strength. Adrian drove him backward. Ryan's head cracked against the brick wall with a sickening thud. Adrian pinned him there, lifting him onto his toes. Ryan clawed at Adrian's hand, gasping for air, his face turning red. Adrian didn't even blink. His expression remained utterly bored, cold and detached. "If you ever bring your filth into my house again," Adrian said, his voice a calm, deadly monotone, "I will have you removed in pieces. Do you understand?" Ryan choked out a strangled sound, his eyes bulging. Adrian leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that Emma strained to hear. "And if you ever touch her again, I will not be this polite." He released his grip. Ryan crumbled to the floor, coughing and retching, clutching his throat. "Get out," Adrian said. Ryan scrambled to his feet, shooting a look of pure venom at Emma, and then bolted for the rear exit. The door slammed shut, leaving a ringing silence in his wake. Emma stood pressed against the wall, her chest heaving. She was shaking. Her wrist throbbed where Ryan had gripped her. Adrian turned to her. The cold mask vanished, replaced by something unreadable. He looked at the shattered glass on the floor, then at her face. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Emma shook her head, unable to find her voice. She rubbed her wrist unconsciously. Adrian stepped closer. He reached out and she flinched. He paused, letting his hand hover in the air until she stilled. Then, with surprising gentleness, he took her hand. His fingers were warm and calloused. He turned her arm over, inspecting the red marks already blooming on her pale skin. He did not break the skin. Adrian murmured, more to himself than to her. He released her hand slowly, as if reluctant to let go. "Come with me. I have to clean this up," Emma stammered, gesturing to the broken vodka. "Someone else will clean it," Adrian stated. It was not a suggestion. "Come. Sit. You look like you are going to fall over." He led her out of the hallway, not back to the bar, but to his private booth in the corner. He gestured for her to sit on the plush velvet bench. He sat opposite her. A server appeared instantly. "Water," Adrian ordered, "and bring the first aid kit from the office." "I am fine." "Mr. Costa, really," Emma said, finding her voice. Her heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I just need to get back to work." "Sit," he said softly. "Please." It was the polite addition that threw her. She sat. For a long moment, he just watched her. His gaze tracked the pulse jumping in her throat, the way her hands clasped together in her lap. It was invasive, yet she did not look away. She felt exposed, stripped raw by the adrenaline and his intensity. "You know him," Adrian said. "It was a statement. He's my ex-boyfriend," Emma admitted, looking down at the table. "We broke up a while ago. He does not take rejection well. He's low-level trash from the South Side," Adrian said dismissively. "He has no business being this far north. I can handle him," Emma said, her chin lifting. A spark of pride flared through her fear. "I have been handling him for months." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at her wrist, then back to her eyes. "You were not handling him tonight." "Emma." She flushed. "I caught him off guard. It will not happen again, no," Adrian said. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating through the small space between them. "It will not, because Veritas is a sanctuary. When you are under my roof, you are safe. That is the rule." The server returned with a glass of water and a small white box. Adrian dismissed him with a wave. He opened the kit, took out a gel pack for bruises, and cracked it. "Give me your hand," he said. "I can do it," Emma protested. "Emma," he said. She gave him her hand. He placed the cold pack against her wrist, holding it there with his own hand. His thumb brushed against the inside of her wrist, directly over her pulse point. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up her arm. She looked up, startled, and found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you help me? You do not even know my name." "I know your name," he said. "You are Emma. You work harder than anyone else on my floor. You have a sick mother, and you drive a car that needs a new transmission." Emma stared at him, cold dread mingling with the heat in her cheeks. "How do you know that? I make it my business to know the people who work for me," Adrian said smoothly. He did not apologize for the invasion of privacy. He held the ice pack for another minute, the silence stretching between them. It wasn't an empty silence. It was charged, heavy with things unsaid. Emma realized with a start that she wasn't scared of him. She should be. He had just choked a man half to death against a wall without raising his pulse. But sitting here, with his hand holding hers, she felt a profound, unsettling sense of protection. "Go home, Emma," Adrian said, finally pulling back. "Take the rest of the night off. You will be paid for the full shift. I cannot—" She started. "Do not argue with me," he said, a ghost of a smile touching the corner of his mouth. "It is a terrifying expression." She stood up, her legs feeling unsteady. "Thank you, Mr. Costa." "Adrian," she paused. "Thank you, Adrian." He nodded once. The mask of authority slipped back into place, but his eyes remained fixed on her as she walked away. She could feel his gaze on her spine, a physical weight, until she disappeared into the staff locker room. When she exited the back of the club 20 minutes later, clutching her bag, a sleek black sedan was idling at the curb, the window rolled down. "Mr. Costa instructed me to take you home. Miss Romano," the driver said. He was a thick-necked man with kind eyes. Emma hesitated. A courtesy ride from the Mafia boss. It felt like crossing a line. It felt like accepting a debt. But her wrist throbbed, and the thought of waiting on the dark subway platform, looking over her shoulder for Ryan, made her stomach turn. "Thank you," she said, and climbed into the back seat. The car smelled of leather and conditioned air. As they glided through the rainy streets of Gray Harbor, Emma leaned her head against the cool glass. She closed her eyes, but all she could see was Adrian, the way he had stood between her and Ryan, like a monolith, the cold violence in his eyes when he looked at Ryan, and the confusing, terrifying gentleness when he looked at her. He had watched her. He knew about her mother. He knew about her car. He had been watching her for a long time. The vibration of her phone in her pocket shattered her thoughts. She pulled it out, the screen glowing bright in the dark car. 3 text messages, all from Ryan. The first was a string of incoherent curses. The second was a photo. It was a selfie taken in a bathroom mirror, harsh fluorescent light illuminating his neck. The skin was already turning a deep, angry purple in the shape of a handprint. The third message made Emma's blood run cold. "You think you are smart running to Costa? You think he cares about you? You are nothing to him. But you are mine. I am going to make you regret this. Watch your back. Em." She stared at the words until they blurred. Her hands shook as she deleted the thread, blocking the number again. But the fear remained, a cold knot in her stomach. She was caught between 2 monsters now. One who wanted to possess her out of spite, and one who had stepped in to protect her for reasons she did not understand. The driver pulled up to her apartment building, a rundown complex on the edge of the city where the streetlights flickered. "Wait until I am inside. Please," Emma whispered. "Of course, Miss," the driver said. She ran to the front door, fumbled with her keys, and locked herself inside. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the street, wondering if the headlights passing by belonged to Ryan or to the men Adrian Costa surely had patrolling his city. The next morning, the world felt too bright, too loud. Emma dragged herself into the law firm, her eyes gritty with lack of sleep. The fluorescent lights of the office hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. "Emma, can you pull the files for the Labyrinth Trust, mister?" Vance called out from his office. "We have to finalize the acquisition before noon." Emma nodded, moving to the secure filing cabinet. She functioned on autopilot, her fingers deftly flipping through the color-coded folders. Labyrinth Trust? It was one of their largest anonymous clients, a holding company that moved millions of dollars through real estate and logistics. She pulled the thick folder. As she did, a loose document slipped out from the back, fluttering to the floor. Emma bent down to pick it up. It was a deed transfer for a warehouse on the docks, a standard piece of paperwork, but her eyes caught the signature at the bottom of the guarantor page. It was not a lawyer's scrawl. It was a bold, sharp signature in black ink. A. Costa. Emma stopped breathing. She stared at the paper. The Labyrinth Trust, the anonymous client that paid the firm's biggest retainers. It was him. Adrian Costa wasn't just a man she had met in a bar. He wasn't just the owner of Veritas. He was here. His money paid her salary. His influence was in the very walls of the building where she spent her days. She had thought her 2 worlds, the daylight world of the law and the nighttime world of the bar, were separate. She had thought she could keep them apart. Slowly. Emma slid the paper back into the file and closed the folder. Her hands were trembling again. She realized then, with a sinking feeling of inevitability, that she hadn't just stepped into Adrian's orbit last night. She had been living in it all along. And now that he had noticed her, now that he had touched her, there would be no going back. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She flinched, terrified it was Ryan. But when she checked the screen, it wasn't a text. It was a notification from her bank. Deposit received, $5,000. Sender, Veritas bonus? Emma stared at the number. It was exactly enough to cover her mother's next treatment. She looked up at the window, at the gray skyline of Gray Harbor, somewhere out there, in a glass tower or a dark room. Adrian Costa was pulling strings she hadn't even known were attached to her. She should return it, She should run. But as she thought of her mother's pale face and the stack of overdue bills on her counter, Emma knew she wouldn't. She was already trapped. 3 days had passed since the incident in the back hallway of Veritas, and Emma Romano was determined to prove that her life still belonged to her. The heavy, suffocating sensation of being watched had followed her every moment since Adrian Costa had iced her wrist and sent her home in a luxury sedan. She felt it at the grocery store. She felt it on the subway. She felt it now. Standing at the employee entrance of the bar as the heavy steel door clicked shut behind her. "Mister," Costa insisted, the head of security, a man named Marcus, said. He stood by the idling black town car, holding the rear door open. "It is raining. Miss Romano, let us take you home." It was not just raining, the sky over Gray Harbor was weeping, a cold, miserable drizzle that turned the streetlights into blurry halos of orange and white. But Emma shook her head, clutching her purse strap tight against her shoulder. "No, thank you." "Marcus," she said, her voice firm despite the fatigue dragging at her bones. "I live 6 blocks away. I need the fresh air. Tell Mr. Costa I appreciate the offer, but I am perfectly capable of walking to my own apartment." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, his eyes flicking nervously toward the upper windows of the club where his boss likely watched. But he finally nodded. "Be safe, Miss Romano." Emma turned and walked away before she could change her mind. She needed to reclaim the boundaries of her existence. If she got into that car again, she felt she would be acknowledging a debt she could never repay, admitting that she needed the protection of a man whose name was whispered in fear across the city. She turned onto 4th Street, head down against the wind. The city was quiet here, away from the main strip of bars and clubs. The warehouses loomed dark and silent, their brick facades slick with water. She was halfway down the block when the shadows between 2 buildings seemed to detach themselves and move. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She quickened her pace, her grip tightening on her keys. She told herself it was just a stray cat or the wind moving a tarp. Then she heard the scrape of boots on pavement. She spun around, but it was too late. A hand shot out from the darkness of a recessed doorway, grabbing her upper arm with bruising force. "You are hard to get a hold of these days. Em." The voice was slurred, thick with rage and liquor. Ryan Cole shoved her backward, his momentum driving them both into the narrow, unlit alley between a pawn shop and a shuttered bakery. Emma gasped as her back hit the rough brick wall. The impact knocked the wind out of her. Before she could scream, Ryan was there, pressing his body against hers, pinning her in place. He smelled of cheap whiskey and unwashed clothes, a sharp, sour stench that made her stomach churn. "Ryan," she choked out, pushing against his chest with both hands. "Get off me! I saw you," he spat, his face inches from hers. "I saw you get into his car the other night. You think you are royalty now? You think because you let the boss look at you? You are too good to answer my texts." He was not just angry, he was unhinged. His eyes were wide and bloodshot in the dim light filtering in from the street. This was not the petty jealousy of an ex-boyfriend anymore. This was something dangerous. "Leave me alone," Emma shouted, her voice cracking. She slammed the heel of her hand into his shoulder, trying to break his hold. Ryan laughed, a wet, ugly sound. He grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of her arms so hard she knew it would leave marks. He shook her, his head snapping back and forth. "You do not listen," he shouted. "I told you that you belong to me. You do not get to walk away until I say we are done. You think Costa cares about you? You are just a toy to him, but you are mine. Emma, mine." He leaned in, his mouth wet and loose, trying to force a kiss on her. Panic flared white-hot in Emma's chest. She turned her face away, squeezing her eyes shut, and shoved him with every ounce of strength she had left. She managed to create a few inches of space, but in the struggle, her purse slipped from her shoulder and hit the wet pavement with a splash. Her keys clattered away into the dark. "No!" she screamed, terror finally breaking through her defiance. "Get away from me!" Ryan's expression twisted from mockery to pure violence. He raised a hand, his fist clenching. "You need to learn some respect." he hissed. Suddenly, the alley was flooded with blinding white light. High beams cut through the rain, illuminating the falling droplets like diamonds. A low, powerful engine growled, and a sleek black car swerved into the mouth of the alley, blocking the exit completely. Ryan froze, his arm still raised, squinting into the glare. The driver's side door opened. Adrian Costa stepped out. He did not run. He did not shout. He moved with a terrifying, deliberate slowness. He wore a long black wool coat over his suit, the collar turned up against the rain. His face was a mask of stone, unreadable and utterly devoid of mercy. 2 other men, large and silent, stepped out from the car behind him, but they stayed back. Adrian walked alone. Ryan released Emma and stumbled back a step, shielding his eyes. "Who is there?" he shouted, his voice wavering. Adrian did not answer. He walked straight through the rain, his eyes fixed on Ryan. The silence he carried was heavier than any shout. Emma slumped against the wall, her legs shaking so badly she thought she might fall. "Adrian," she breathed, the name falling from her lips like a prayer. Adrian stopped 3 feet away. He glanced at Emma, a quick, sweeping assessment that checked for blood, for injury, before returning his gaze to Ryan. He positioned himself deliberately between them, his broad back blocking Emma's view of her attacker, shielding her completely. "Go to the car." "Emma," Adrian said. His voice was low, calm, and terrifyingly flat. Ryan puffed up his chest, trying to summon the bravado that had fueled him moments ago. "This is none of your business. Costa, she's my girlfriend. We are just talking." Adrian ignored him. He did not even look at him. He turned his head slightly toward Emma, who was still frozen against the wall. "Emma," he repeated, softer this time. "Get in the car." She pushed herself off the wall, her knees knocking together. She scrambled past them, avoiding looking at Ryan, and ran toward the open back door of the sedan where one of the bodyguards was waiting to help her in. "Hey!" Ryan shouted. "I am talking to you." Emma glanced back as she reached the car handle. Adrian had stepped closer to Ryan. He was not touching him. He didn't have to. The sheer force of his presence seemed to suck the air out of the alley. Ryan was backing up, hitting the wall that Emma had just been pinned against. "You have 2 choices," Adrian said. His voice carried clearly through the rain, smooth and cold as polished steel. "Choice 1 is that you disappear. You leave this city tonight. You never speak her name again. You never look at her again. You forget she exists. And choice 2, Ryan sneered, though his hands were trembling by his sides. Adrian finally smiled. It was a small, mirthless curving of his lips that did not reach his eyes. "Choice 2 is that you stay, and you face the consequences of touching what is mine." The air in the alley seemed to vibrate with tension. Ryan's bravado crumbled. He looked at the 2 bodyguards, then back at Adrian's dead calm face, and the realization of his mistake washed over him. He was a small fish who had just swum into the mouth of a shark. "Get her out of here," Adrian ordered over his shoulder, never taking his eyes off Ryan. The bodyguard gently guided Emma into the back seat and closed the door, sealing out the sound of the rain. The interior was warm and quiet. The car began to reverse immediately. Emma twisted in her seat, looking out the rear window. In the red glow of the taillights, she saw the scene recede. Adrian and Ryan were still standing there in the rain. They were talking. Ryan was pleading now, his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Adrian stood motionless, a dark statue of judgment, as the car turned the corner, breaking her line of sight. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dampness of her clothes. She knew, with a sick certainty in the pit of her stomach, that the conversation in the alley would not end with a handshake. She stared at her hands, which were still trembling in her lap. She was safe, but the cost of that safety was happening in a dark alley 3 blocks away, and she had been the one to trigger it. 20 minutes later, Emma was inside her apartment. She had locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, and latched the chain. She had turned on every light in the small 1-bedroom unit. She stood in the center of her living room, shivering, still wearing her wet coat. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a crash of exhaustion and nausea. She jumped when a sharp knock echoed from the door. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice thin. "It is Adrian. Open the door." "Emma." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She hesitated, then walked to the door. Her fingers fumbled with the locks, chain, bolt, knob. She pulled it open. Adrian stood in the hallway. He was wet. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and droplets of water clung to the wool of his coat. Behind him stood one of his men, a silent sentinel watching the stairwell. "May I come in?" Adrian asked. It was phrased as a question, but his body was already moving forward. Emma stepped back, allowing him entry. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Is he gone?" Adrian did not answer immediately. He closed the door and locked it himself, testing the handle to ensure it held. Then he moved past her, walking through her small apartment with efficient, precise strides. He checked the window locks in the living room. He walked into her bedroom and checked the fire escape access. He opened the closet. It was invasive, mildly obsessive, and completely overwhelming. "Adrian, please," Emma said, following him into the kitchen. "You are scaring me. What is happening?" He turned to face her. The kitchen was tiny, barely big enough for 2 people. Adrian seemed to fill the entire space. He took off his wet coat and draped it over one of her dining chairs, revealing the pristine suit underneath. Miraculously dry. "I am ensuring your security," he said. "Your lock on the back window is flimsy. I will have someone replace it tomorrow. I do not want—" "Stop," he said. He stepped closer. The distance between them vanished. Emma backed up until her hips hit the counter. Adrian did not stop until he was standing inside her personal space, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and something metallic, like ozone or copper. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. Emma held her breath, her eyes wide. He gently, so gently she barely felt it, tipped her chin up with one finger. His eyes narrowed as he inspected her jawline. "He hurt you," Adrian said softly. His voice was a low rumble in his chest. Emma flinched. She hadn't realized, but there was a dull throb on the side of her face where Ryan must have gripped her during the struggle. "It is nothing," she whispered. "Just a bruise." Adrian's eyes darkened. The fury he was keeping caged behind his ribs flared in his gaze, terrifying and intense. His thumb brushed the air just above the skin of her jaw, tracing the shape of the mark as if he wanted to wipe it away. "It is not nothing," he said. "No man puts his hand on you in anger. Not ever." His gaze dropped to her lips, then back up to her eyes. The air in the kitchen felt thick, charged with a sudden, confusing intimacy. Emma's heart was racing, but not from fear anymore. Or perhaps it was fear, but a different kind, the fear of being this close to a fire and wanting to touch it. She let out a shaky breath, the fight draining out of her. Her shoulders slumped. "I am so tired." "Adrian," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I am tired of looking over my shoulder. I am tired of being scared of him. I just want it to stop." Adrian's expression softened. For the first time, the hard lines of his face relaxed. He moved his hand from her chin to cup her cheek, his thumb sweeping lightly over her cheekbone. His palm was warm and rough, a grounding weight against her skin. "It stops tonight," he said. His tone was absolute, a vow. "I promise you." "Emma," he continued, his eyes locking onto hers with hypnotic intensity. "No one gets to put their hands on you again. You are under my protection now." Emma looked at him, searching his face. She saw the danger in him, the violence that coiled just beneath the surface of his expensive suit. But she also saw a fierce, possessive devotion that she had never experienced in her life. "Thank you," she whispered, hating herself for the gratitude, hating that she needed him, but feeling it all the same. Adrian held her gaze for a second longer, his thumb lingering on her skin. Then he pulled back, the mask of control sliding back into place. "Lock the door behind me," he said, his voice returning to business. "Do not open it for anyone but me or Marcus." He turned and walked out. Emma locked the door, her hand pressing against the wood as if she could still feel the warmth of his touch on the other side. Later that night, the rain stopped, leaving the city in a heavy, humid silence. Emma lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the alley. She saw Adrian's car blocking the exit. In the distance, the wail of sirens rose and fell, echoing off the wet pavement of the city. It was a common sound in Gray Harbor, but tonight it made the hair on Emma's arms stand up. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up. It was a text from Sarah, one of the other bartenders at Veritas. "OMG, Emma, did you hear? Police are all over the docks. Someone found a body down by the shipping yards. They are saying it is something with Ryan. Cops were here asking if anyone saw him tonight." Emma stared at the screen. The light from the phone seemed to sear her retinas. Something with Ryan, a body. She sat up slowly, clutching the duvet to her chest. Ice crawled up her spine, vertebra by vertebra. She remembered the look on Adrian's face in the kitchen. It stops tonight. She remembered the way he had stood in the alley, giving Ryan a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. She knew. She had no proof, no witnesses, but she knew as surely as she knew her own name. Adrian had killed him, or he had ordered it done. Ryan was dead because he had touched her. She felt sick. Tears pricked her eyes, not for Ryan, who had terrorized her, but for the line she had just crossed. She was no longer an observer. She was the catalyst. A man was dead, and the man who killed him had stood in her kitchen an hour ago and touched her face with the same hand that had signed the death warrant. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, indifferent to the secrets of the night. Emma dressed mechanically, her movements sluggish. She couldn't go to the law firm today. She couldn't focus on contracts and filings when her mind was full of sirens and shadows. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Romano?" It was Adrian's voice, clear, calm, utterly normal. "Yes," she said, her throat dry. "I have instructed the manager at Veritas to take you off the schedule for the next 2 weeks," he said. "With full pay, I want you to take some time, until things calm down." Emma gripped the phone. The casual way he handled it, paying her to stay away, managing her life like a business asset, sparked a flash of anger that cut through her fear. "I do not need your charity." "Adrian," she said, surprised by the sharpness of her own voice. "I cannot just sit at home and take your money. I have bills to pay. I have to work." There was a pause on the other end. "Come to my office," he said, "the one in the tower, not the club. We need to discuss this." Emma hung up. She put on her best blazer, trying to armor herself. She took a taxi to the Costa Enterprises Tower in the financial district. The office was a world away from the dark velvet of Veritas. It was all glass and steel, located on the 45th floor with a panoramic view of the harbor. Adrian sat behind a massive mahogany desk, reviewing a stack of documents. When Emma walked in, he stood up. He looked rested, impeccable. There was no trace of the man who had stood in the rain-slicked alley. "I told you I do not want a handout," Emma said, standing before his desk. She refused to sit. "If I do not work, I do not get paid. That is how my life works." Adrian walked around the desk. He leaned against the edge of it, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked at her with that same unsettling focus. "I anticipated you might be difficult about this." He said, "I am not being difficult. I am being independent." "Fine," Adrian said. "Then let us make a deal. You need money. I need someone I can trust to handle the books for my logistics company. The current accountant is retiring." Emma narrowed her eyes. "A logistics company. That was the legal front, the clean money. I am a legal assistant, not a bookkeeper." She said. "You are smart," Adrian countered. "You know how to be discreet. And you are already involved, Emma. Whether you like it or not." He picked up a folder from the desk and held it out to her. "The salary is triple what you make at the law firm," he said, "plus benefits. Full coverage for your mother's medical bills. No questions asked." Emma looked at the folder. Triple the salary. Full medical coverage. It was the answer to every prayer she had whispered to the ceiling for the past 5 years. It meant her mother would get the best surgeons. It meant the debt would vanish. But she knew what it really was. It was a golden cage. If she took this, she wasn't just working for him at night. She would be his, day and night. She would be embedded in his empire, keeping his secrets, eating food bought with his money. She looked up at him. His face was impassive, but his eyes were dark and waiting. He knew he had her. He knew exactly what she needed, and he was offering it to her on a silver platter. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because," Adrian said, pushing the folder into her hand, "I protect what is mine." Emma looked down at the folder. She thought of Ryan's bruised neck. She thought of the sirens. She thought of her mother's heart monitor beeping in a sterile room. She took the folder. "I start on Monday," she said. Adrian smiled. It was genuine this time, sharp and victorious. "Welcome to the family, Emma." The transition from mixing drinks at Veritas to managing the books at Costa Logistics was a shift that made Emma dizzy, though she told herself it was only the altitude. Working on the 45th floor of the Costa Tower, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of Gray Harbor, felt like living on a different planet. She sat at a sleek, modern desk made of dark walnut, staring at the rows of numbers on her monitor. The math was clean. The logic was sound. For all the rumors that swirled in the gutters of the city about the Costa Syndicate, the legitimate side of Adrian's business was run with military precision. Emma checked her bank balance on her phone for the third time that morning. The number was higher than she had ever seen it. She had already transferred the funds for her mother's upcoming surgery, and for the first time in 5 years, the crushing weight of impending financial ruin had lifted from her chest. "Just until the debts are gone," she whispered to herself, a mantra she repeated every time the elevator doors slid shut, sealing her in this glass tower. "Just until Mom is safe." She heard the heavy door to the inner office open. Emma straightened her spine instinctively. Adrian walked out, reviewing a contract as he moved. He was in his element here. If he was a king in the nightlife of Veritas, here he was a general. He wore his suits like armor, tailored to perfection, projecting an air of absolute, unshakable control. "Emma," he said, not looking up from the paper, "bring up the quarterly projections for the shipping lanes." "Already on your screen," she replied. He stopped, looking at her. A faint quirk appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Efficient," he noted. "I like to be prepared," she said. He walked around her desk. Instead of going to his own computer, he stood behind her chair. Emma felt the fine hairs on the back of her neck stand up. He was not touching her, but his presence was a physical weight, a wall of heat and expensive cologne, sandalwood and something crisp, like winter air. He leaned over her shoulder, one hand resting on the edge of the desk, the other pointing at a column on her screen. "This figure here," he said, his voice dropping low. "It is too conservative. The fuel surcharges will drop by next month. Adjust it by 12%. Emma tried to focus on the numbers, but it was impossible. His face was inches from hers. She could feel the warmth of his breath against her ear as he spoke. She could see the clean line of his jaw and the shadow of stubble that always seemed to hover there, defying his razor. 12%, she repeated, her voice sounding breathless to her own ears. "I will fix it." Adrian did not move away immediately. He stayed there, boxing her in, his gaze shifting from the screen to her profile. For a moment, the office sounds, the hum of the server, the distant ring of a phone, faded into silence. "You are doing good work, Emma," he said softly. "Better than the last 3 accountants combined. I am just doing my job, Adrian." He finally straightened, the distance returning, and Emma felt the loss of his heat like a sudden draft. "Keep doing it," he said, walking back to his office. The weeks blurred into a routine that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Emma saw the disciplined, strategic mind that allowed him to control the city. He negotiated deals with a ruthless calm, dissecting his opponent's weaknesses before they even realized they were bleeding. He was brilliant, and he was dangerous. Then came the night of the storm. It was late October, and a nor'easter was hammering the coast. Rain lashed against the high-rise windows with violent force, turning the city lights below into smeared streaks of color. The office was empty. The rest of the staff had gone home hours ago, fleeing the weather, but Adrian had stayed to monitor a shipment, and Emma had stayed because he had... She was in the break room, pouring a cup of coffee, when the building shuddered. A crack of thunder, loud as a cannon shot, exploded directly overhead. The lights in the office flickered and died, plunging the room into gray shadows before the emergency generators hummed to life, bathing the space in a dim, amber glow. Emma jumped, her hand jerking. Hot coffee splashed over the rim of the mug, soaking her hand and spilling onto the polished table. "Damn it," she hissed, shaking her hand. She grabbed a stack of napkins, her heart racing from the sudden noise. "Are you all right?" She spun around. Adrian was standing in the doorway of the break room. He had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. In the dim light, with the storm raging behind him outside the glass walls, he looked less like a CEO and more like something primal. "I am fine," Emma said, dabbing at the spill. "Just the thunder, it startled me." He walked over, his movements quiet. "Let me see." He took her hand. His grip was firm but surprisingly gentle. He examined the red skin where the coffee had scalded her. "Run it under cold water," he instructed, leading her to the sink. He turned on the tap and held her hand under the stream. The cool water was a relief, but the sensation of his fingers laced with hers was overwhelming. They stood side by side in the semi-darkness, the only sound the rushing water and the rain hammering against the glass. Adrian turned off the tap. He reached for a paper towel and began to dry her hand, his motions slow and deliberate. He dried each finger, his touch lingering on her skin. "You should go home," he said, though he made no move to release her. "The storm is getting worse." "I cannot drive in this," Emma admitted, looking up at him. "My car would float away." Adrian half smiled. "Then you are trapped here with me." It was said lightly, but the weight of the words hung in the air. Trapped. With him. They moved back to his office, where the view of the storm was most intense. They didn't turn on the overhead lights. The amber glow from the hallway and the flashes of lightning were enough. Adrian poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed one to her. "Bourbon," he said. "It helps with the nerves." Emma took a sip. It burned pleasantly on the way down. She sat on the leather sofa, and Adrian sat in the armchair opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "Tell me about them," he said suddenly. "About who? Your family. You worked 2 jobs to pay for your mother. Where's your father?" Emma looked into her glass. "He left when I was 12, she said quietly. "He said the medical bills were too much pressure. He went out for cigarettes and never came back." Classic, right? Adrian did not laugh. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like her small, sad story was the most important thing in the world. "Cowardice is common," Adrian said, his voice hard. "Loyalty is rare." "What about you?" Emma asked. "Emboldened by the bourbon and the darkness, you took over this company very young, didn't you?" "I was 22, Adrian said. He looked out the window, his eyes reflecting the lightning. "My father was killed. It was not unexpected, given our line of work, but it was sudden. I had plans to study architecture. I wanted to build things." "Architecture?" Emma asked, surprised. Adrian nodded. "I liked the idea of creating something permanent, something that stood against the sky. But when he died, there was a vacuum. If I'd not stepped in, the city would have burned. The rival families would have torn everything apart. So I put down the blueprints and I picked up the gun." There was a vulnerability in his voice that Emma had never heard before. He wasn't the monster the city feared. He was a man who had sacrificed his own dreams to hold up the weight of a legacy he hadn't asked for. "It must be lonely," she whispered. Adrian looked back at her. "It was," he said, "until recently." Emma's breath hitched. She stood up, needing to move, needing to diffuse the sudden thickness in the air. She walked to the window, watching the jagged forks of white light tear across the sky over the harbor. Adrian stood too. He came up behind her. He didn't touch her, but she could feel him there. a solid, warm presence at her back. "You are not like the others." "Emma," he said softly, "you do not look at me and see a checkbook, and you do not look at me and see a monster." "I see you," she said, her voice trembling. Lightning flashed, illuminating their reflections in the glass. In the reflection, she saw him raise his hand. He reached out as if to touch her hair, his fingers hovering inches from her head. He hesitated, his hand trembling slightly, a man who was used to taking whatever he wanted, suddenly afraid to cross a line. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't move away. She leaned back, just an inch, invading his space. It was a silent permission, a surrender. Adrian closed the distance. His fingers brushed the shell of her ear, tucking a loose strand of dark hair behind it. His touch was electric, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. A second clap of thunder shook the building, loud and violent. Emma flinched, instinctively turning away from the window. She turned straight into him. Adrian stepped closer, his hand sliding from her hair to the small of her back, steadying her. He looked down at her, his eyes dark and searching. He was waiting for her to push him away. He was giving her one last chance to run. Emma did not run. She looked up at him, seeing the conflict in his eyes, the war between the man who wanted to protect her and the man who wanted to possess her. "Adrian," she breathed. He didn't wait any longer. His other hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing her lower lip, and then he lowered his head. The kiss was not frantic. It was slow, deep, and devastatingly intense. It tasted of bourbon and suppressed longing. Emma let out a small sound, her hands coming up to grip the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. Adrian groaned low in his throat, his arm around her waist tightened, pulling her flush against him. She could feel the hard lines of his body, the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was the only air left in the room. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "You have no idea," he whispered roughly, "how long I've wanted to do that." Emma's hands were still clutching his shirt. She felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The line was crossed. There was no going back to ledgers and spreadsheets now. Over the next few weeks, the office became a landscape of secrets. They maintained the facade of professionalism during the day, but the air between them was charged with a new, dangerous electricity. It was in the stolen moments that no one else saw. It was Adrian guiding her through a crowded charity gala he forced her to attend as staff, his hand resting possessively at the curve of her waist, his fingers pressing into the silk of her dress with a claim that made her knees weak. It was the morning in the elevator, just the two of them rising 40 floors. Adrian didn't speak. He simply stood beside her and let his thumb trace slow, maddening circles against her hip bone, his eyes fixed on the numbers counting up, while Emma had to bite her lip to keep from making a sound. It was the late nights when the cleaning crews had gone. Emma would be finishing a report, and Adrian would come in and sit on the edge of her desk. They would talk about everything and nothing, his knee pressing firmly against hers, a constant point of contact that grounded her in his world. But the world outside the tower was not as quiet. 3 weeks later, on a Friday afternoon, Adrian came out of his office. His face was grim. "Pack a bag," he said. "What?" Emma asked, looking up from her computer. "You are not staying at your apartment this weekend," he stated. "There has been chatter, vague threats. I am not taking chances. Where am I going?" "You are coming with me." "To the penthouse." The penthouse was on the top floor of a residential tower a few blocks away. It was a fortress of luxury, accessible only by a private elevator that required a biometric scan. That night, the city felt distant, muted by the height and the heavy soundproofing. Emma stood in the center of the living room, feeling small. "You are safe here," Adrian said, locking the heavy door. "No one gets in unless I allow it." The tension of the threat, combined with the enforced proximity, stripped away the last of their defenses. They didn't sleep in separate rooms. They didn't sleep at all. At first, they lay on the massive velvet sofa in the sunken living room, fully clothed. Adrian lay on his back, and Emma lay beside him, her head resting on his chest. His arm was wrapped around her, holding her with a fierceness that bordered on painful. She listened to the steady, strong rhythm of his heart. It was the only thing that made sense in the chaos. "Adrian," she whispered into the darkness, "are we safe? Truly? As long as I am breathing. You are safe," he answered. He turned his head, kissing her forehead, then her temple. It wasn't sexual. Not tonight. It was an intimacy far deeper than that. It was the desperate need for human contact in a life defined by violence. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, two people holding onto each other as the world burned around them. But the daylight always brought the truth back into focus. Emma began to see the cracks in the armor. She began to understand what logistics really meant for the Costa syndicate. She heard it in the passing comments Adrian made to his lieutenants when he thought she wasn't listening. Phrases like, "clean up the problem and send a message." She heard it in the hushed, rapid-fire Italian he spoke on the phone, his voice dropping to a register that sounded like grating stone. And then, there was the Tuesday morning that changed everything. Emma was walking toward the conference room with a stack of files. The door to Adrian's private meeting room, a soundproofed space she was never invited into, opened abruptly. A man stumbled out. Emma froze. The man was holding a cloth to his nose, which was clearly broken. Blood was streaming down his chin, staining his expensive shirt. He was limping behind him, inside the room. Emma saw two of Adrian's enforcers wiping down the table. And she saw Adrian when he was standing by the window, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked perfectly calm. He looked at the bleeding man with cold indifference, then looked up and saw Emma standing in the hallway. For a second, the mask slipped. She saw a flash of regret in his eyes, but he didn't look away. He didn't try to hide it. The injured man scurried past Emma, muttering an apology, terrified to even look at her. Emma stood rooted to the spot, clutching the files to her chest. Her heart was pounding, not with the excitement of his touch, but with cold, hard fear. Adrian walked out of the room. He stopped in front of her. He checked her face, searching for revulsion. "Emma," he said quietly. Will he be okay?" she stammered. "He stole from us," Adrian said. His voice was devoid of emotion. "He is lucky to be walking at all." Emma looked at Adrian's hands, the same hands that had tucked her hair behind her ear, the same hands that had held her through the night on his sofa. There was no blood on them, but she could see it all the same. She realized then that she had fallen in love with a man who was two things at once. He was her protector, the man who made her feel safe for the first time in her life, and he was a monster who broke men's bones before lunch. "I have work to do," she whispered, stepping around him. Adrian didn't stop her. He watched her go, his expression hardening. He knew, as she did, that the bubble they had built in the storm was fragile, and the real world was coming for them with a sledgehammer. Emma went back to her desk, her hands shaking as she typed. She looked out at the city, at the gray harbor waters, and wondered how long she could live in the shadow of a mountain before the avalanche came down. The peace that Emma had found in the glass tower was an illusion, shattered not by thunder this time, but by the jagged reality of war. The Costa Syndicate had ruled Gray Harbor for decades, but power in the underworld was like blood in the water. It attracted sharks. The Navarra crew, a brutal organization from the southern districts, had sensed a shift in the currents. They had smelled weakness, and for the first time in Adrian Costa's reign, that weakness had a name. It started with the phone calls, silence on the other end, heavy and breathing, followed by a click. Then came the messages, encrypted texts that bypassed her spam filters, arriving at 3 a.m. "Ask him how much you are worth. We know where your mother sleeps." Emma tried to hide them from Adrian, terrified of what his reaction would be, but the war came to her doorstep regardless. She returned to her apartment building one Tuesday evening to find her front door vandalized. Red paint had been splashed across the wood, dripping onto the welcome mat like a gruesome promise. Scrawled in the center, in jagged letters, was a single word: leverage. She stood in the hallway, her grocery bag slipping from her numb fingers, the smell of aerosol and fear choking her. She was no longer just an accountant. She was a target. 2 days later, the law firm felt less like a sanctuary and more like a waiting room. Emma exited the building at lunch, needing air. Her nerves frayed to the breaking point. "Emma?" She jumped. Spinning around, standing on the sidewalk, holding 2 coffees, was a face from a lifetime ago. Jordan Hale. They had taken political science classes together at the state university, years before debt and desperation had derailed her plans. "Jordan," she breathed, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me." "I am sorry," Jordan said, offering a charming, easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I saw you coming out and thought, no way is that Emma Romano." "It has been, 5 years? 6, she corrected, her pulse slowly returning to normal. "You look good." "Jordan, so do you," he said, "though you look tired, Em." He was wearing a cheap suit and badge clipped to his belt, a detective. The realization made her stomach drop. "I'm just busy," she said, edging away. "It was good to see you, Jordan, but I have to get back." "Walk with me," he said. His voice changed. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a professional hardness. "Just for a block. We need to talk." "Emma." "About what?" "About Adrian Costa." Emma froze. The air on the busy street seemed to thin. "I do not know what you are talking about," she lied, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Jordan stepped closer, dropping the facade entirely. "I know you're working for him, Emma. We've been watching the Costa accounts for months. We know you moved to the logistics division, and we know you are spending nights at his penthouse. That is none of your business," she snapped, turning to walk away. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. He pulled a manila envelope from his jacket pocket. "Is this my business?" he asked, sliding a photograph out just enough for her to see. Emma looked down. The world tilted on its axis. It was a crime scene photo, grainy, stark, and horrifying. It showed a body slumped in the mud near the shipping yards. The face was pale and slack, but the bruising on the neck was unmistakable. "Ryan, he washed up 3 weeks ago," Jordan said, his voice low and urgent, broken hyoid bone, crushed trachea. "The coroner said he was strangled by someone with immense strength and training. It was personal. Emma." Emma stared at the image, bile rising in her throat. She remembered the alley. She remembered Adrian's hand on Ryan's throat, the effortless violence. "It stops tonight. Costa killed him," Jordan stated. "He killed him because of you." "You do not know that," Emma whispered, looking away. "I know how Costa operates." Jordan pressed. "He clears the board. Ryan was a nuisance, so he removed him. But now you are in the blast radius. Emma, Navarra is moving in. If you stay with Costa, you are going to end up just like Ryan, or worse. You are collateral damage waiting to happen." "I have to go," Emma said, shoving past him. Tears blurred her vision. Jordan called after her. "When you are ready to talk, call me, before it is too late." Emma ran. She didn't go back to the firm. She took a taxi straight to the tower, her hands shaking so badly she could barely pay the driver. She stormed past Adrian's assistant, bursting into his office. Adrian was on a call, standing by the window. He turned, seeing her face, and immediately hung up the phone without a word. "Emma?" he said, stepping toward her. "What is it?" She threw her bag onto the sofa. The image of Ryan's dead face burned into her retinas. "Did you kill him?" she demanded. Her voice broke, cracking under the weight of the accusation. Adrian stopped. His expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "We are discussing this now?" he asked calmly. "Yes, we are discussing this now," Emma shouted. "Detective Hale showed me the photo. Adrian, he showed me Ryan's body. He said his throat was crushed." Adrian remained perfectly still. He did not flinch. He did not look away. "Ryan is dead," he said flatly. "Did you order it?" Emma asked, tears streaming down her face. "Or did you do it yourself?" "I removed a threat," Adrian said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He touched you. He threatened you. He made it clear he would not stop. I gave him a choice. He chose poorly. He was a human being," Emma cried. "He was an idiot and he was toxic, but he did not deserve to die. And you You stood in my kitchen that night. You touched my face. You promised me safety. Was that the safety you meant? Murder? I did what was necessary. Adrian's voice rose, a flash of frustration cracking his stoic exterior. You live in a world of laws and sunlight. Emma, I do not. In my world, if someone threatens what is mine, they are eliminated. If I had let him live, he would have come back. He would have hurt you. I refuse to allow that. So you are the judge, jury, and executioner, Emma asked, horrified. If I have to be, yes. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the chasm between them. She loved him. God help her. She loved him, but his hands were stained with blood that had been spilled for her. I cannot do this, she whispered, backing away. I cannot be part of this. Adrian, the police are watching me. Navarra is painting threats on my door, and you are killing people in my name. Emma. Wait, Adrian said, reaching for her. Do not touch me, she said, holding up a hand. I need to leave. I am suffocating here. You cannot leave, Adrian said, his jaw tightening. Navarra is hunting. You are safest here with me. Safe? Emma laughed, a brittle, hysterical sound. I have never been less safe in my life. I am going to my mother's house. No, Adrian commanded. That is too exposed. I do not care, Emma shouted. I need to be away from you. I need to think. If you care about me at all, Adrian, you will let me go. Adrian stared at her. His fists clenched at his sides, the knuckles turning white. He looked like a man fighting a war against his own instincts. Every fiber of his being wanted to lock her in this tower and keep her where he could see her, but he saw the terror in her eyes, and he realized, with a sickening jolt, that right now, he was the one frightening her. Fine, he said, the word clipped and cold. Go to your mother's, but you stay inside. I will do what I want, Emma said. She turned and walked out. Adrian watched her go, a muscle feathering in his jaw. As soon as the elevator doors closed, he picked up his phone. Marcus, he said, his voice deadly quiet. She is going to her mother's house in East Hills. Put a team on the perimeter. 4 men. If anyone other than the mailman gets within 50 feet of that house, I want to know. I thought she wanted space. Boss, Marcus said. She can have space, Adrian said, staring at the empty door. But she does not get to be unprotected. Emma's mother lived in a small, weathered bungalow in a quiet neighborhood where the loudest sound was usually a lawnmower. For 2 days, it felt like a sanctuary. Emma made tea, sat on the porch, and tried to breathe. She told her mother the bruises under her eyes were from overwork. She tried to convince herself she had made the right choice. She tried to convince herself she could walk away from Adrian Costa. But at night, she lay in her childhood bed, aching for the weight of his arm across her chest. She didn't see the black sedan parked 2 streets over. She didn't see the men in the shadows watching her front yard. On the 3rd evening, Emma's mother ran out of her heart medication. The pharmacy was only 6 blocks away. Emma, needing to feel useful, volunteered to walk. It is just a walk, she told herself. I cannot live in fear forever. The autumn air was crisp. Emma walked briskly, her hands shoved deep into her coat pockets. She bought the pills and a chocolate bar, trying to feel normal. She was walking back, passing a stretch of road bordered by an empty lot, when a gray van screeched around the corner. Emma stopped, her instincts screaming. The van mounted the curb, cutting off her path. The side door slid open with a harsh metal grind. 2 men jumped out. They were wearing balaclavas. Emma turned to run, but her boots slipped on the loose gravel. Get her, one of them shouted. Panic, white and blinding, exploded in her brain. She scrambled backward, dropping the pharmacy bag. Help, she screamed, the sound tearing at her throat. The first man reached her. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her coat. Emma kicked out, her boot connecting with his shin. He grunted but didn't let go. He yanked her toward the open van. No, no, Emma shrieked, clawing at his face. The second man grabbed her waist, lifting her feet off the ground. They were dragging her. The dark maw of the van loomed closer. She could smell the stale interior, sweat and old grease. She was going to disappear, just like Ryan. Suddenly, A roar filled the air, not a scream, but an engine. A black SUV tore across the empty lot, smashing through a wooden fence, debris flying. It didn't slow down. It slammed into the side of the gray van with a bone-jarring crash. The impact knocked the men off balance. They dropped Emma. She hit the pavement hard, scraping her palms, and scrambled away on her hands and knees. The doors of the SUV flew open. Adrian Costa did not step out. He erupted. He moved with a violence that was terrifying to behold. He hit the first kidnapper like a freight train, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. The man went down, gasping for air. Adrian didn't stop. He delivered a brutal, calculated kick to the man's ribs, a sickening crack echoing in the quiet street. The second kidnapper fumbled for a gun in his waistband. Adrian spun around. He was faster. He caught the man's wrist, twisting it with a savage jerk. The gun clattered to the asphalt. Adrian drove his elbow into the man's face, shattering his nose. The man collapsed, blood gushing. Marcus and two other guards were there a second later, securing the perimeter, guns drawn but trained on the ground. Adrian stood over the groaning men, his chest heaving. He looked wild. His tie was gone, his shirt collar torn. He looked at the men with a hatred so pure it could have set the asphalt on fire. "Load them up," Adrian barked at Marcus. "The trunk. I will deal with them personally." He turned to Emma. The rage vanished from his face, replaced by a desperate, frantic terror. "Emma!" He fell to his knees beside her. Emma was shaking violently, unable to speak, her eyes wide and fixed on the blood on the pavement. Adrian pulled her into him. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her neck. He was shaking too. "I have you," he rasped, his voice raw. "I have you. You are safe." Emma clung to him. She gripped his shirt, sobbing into his chest. The smell of him, sandalwood and gunpowder, was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. "Get us out of here," Adrian ordered, lifting Emma into his arms as if she weighed nothing. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur of speed and silence. Adrian didn't let go of her hand. He stared out the window, his profile etched in stone, plotting a retribution that would shake the city. When the elevator doors opened into the penthouse, the silence broke. Adrian set her down. He paced the length of the room, running his hands through his hair. "I told you," he shouted, the fear turning into anger. "I told you it was not safe. I told you they were watching. I did not know," Emma screamed back, the shock wearing off and leaving raw adrenaline in its wake. "I just went to get medicine. I cannot be a prisoner." "Adrian, you almost died," Adrian roared, spinning to face her. "Do you understand that? If my men had been 30 seconds slower, if I had been further away." "But you were there," Emma accused. "You were watching me. You lied to me. You said you would let me go. I lied to keep you alive," Adrian countered. "And thank God I did. You think your independence matters to them? You think they care about your boundaries? You are a pawn to them, Emma. A way to hurt me. I never asked for this," Emma cried, tears streaming down her face again. "I never asked to be part of your war. You became part of it the moment I looked at you," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And I am not sorry I looked. I am not sorry." He walked toward her. Emma backed up until she hit the wall of the foyer. She felt the cold plaster against her shoulder blades. Adrian stepped into her space. He was breathing hard, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and adoration. He placed his hands on the wall, one on either side of her head, caging her in. He didn't touch her. He loomed over her, a dark, overwhelming force. "Look at me," he commanded. Emma looked up. His eyes were endless, dark pools of emotion. "I cannot be gentle with them." "Emma," he said, his voice cracking, "you asked me about Ryan. You asked me about morality. There is no morality when it comes to you. I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone take you from me. I will kill every single one of them. Do you understand?" He was telling her he was a monster. He was telling her he was a killer. And God help her. It was the most beautiful, terrible thing she had ever heard. She looked at his chest, heaving with exertion. She looked at the blood on his knuckles, blood he had spilled to save her life. She reached up. Her hands grabbed the lapels of his torn shirt. She pulled him toward her. "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acceptance. It was a surrender to the darkness because the light had failed to protect her. Adrian let out a shuddering breath. He leaned his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "I am sorry," he murmured. "I am so sorry." They stood there for a long time, pressed against the wall, two survivors in a world trying to tear them apart. 2 hours later, the penthouse was quiet. Emma had showered, washing the grit of the alley off her skin, though the fear still clung to her. She sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. Adrian had gone into his study to handle things. The doorbell rang. One of the guards checked the monitor. "It is Detective Hale," he announced. Adrian came out of the study. He had changed his shirt, but his face was still hard. "Let him in." Jordan Hale walked in. He looked tired. He looked at Emma, huddled on the couch, and his expression softened. "I heard about the attempted abduction," he said. "I am glad you are okay." "Emma." "I am fine," Emma said hollowly. Jordan turned to Adrian. "You have had a busy night." "Costa." "I have been here all evening," Adrian said, pouring himself a drink. "Comforting my girlfriend." Jordan let out a short, dry laugh. He pulled a tablet from his bag. "We just got reports from the south side," Jordan said. "A warehouse owned by the Navarra family. It seems they had a gas leak. Massive explosion, and before the fire, witnesses say a single attacker entered the building." He swiped the screen and held it up for Emma to see. It was a grainy surveillance still from a traffic camera across the street from the warehouse. It showed a figure exiting the burning building. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat. He was walking away from the inferno with a calm, terrifying stride. "Several men are in critical condition," Jordan said, watching Emma's face. "One is dead. The leader of the crew that tried to grab you shot execution style." Emma looked at the photo. The silhouette was unmistakable. She looked up at Adrian. He was sipping his drink, watching her. He didn't deny it. He didn't look ashamed. He looked like a man who had kept his promise. "I will deal with them personally." He had left her in the shower. He had gone out, crossed the city, slaughtered the men who had threatened her, and returned before her hair was dry. "That is a tragedy," Adrian said to the detective. "The city is a dangerous place." Jordan took the tablet back. "It is," he agreed, "and it is getting more dangerous by the hour. You are starting a war. Costa. And she is going to be in the middle of it." He looked at Emma one last time. "Make your choice, Emma. But make it fast." When the door closed behind the detective, the silence in the penthouse was deafening. Emma looked at Adrian. She saw the blood on his hands that no amount of washing could remove. She saw the monster, and she knew, with a sinking, terrified heart, that she wasn't leaving. She was in the blast radius, and she was already burning. The explosion did not sound like a movie effect. It was not a grand, rolling boom. It was a sharp, cracking snap that punched the air out of the street, followed instantly by a wave of heat that felt like a physical blow. Emma Romano had been standing exactly 20 feet away from the silver sedan that was meant to take her to the office. She had stopped, her hand hovering over the door handle, when her phone buzzed with a request from Adrian's assistant to grab a specific file from the courier across the street. That 3-second delay, that mundane administrative pivot, saved her life. She was thrown backward by the force of the blast, landing hard on the pavement. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out the screaming of pedestrians. She looked up, dazed, to see the sedan, the car she sat in every morning, engulfed in a pillar of black smoke and orange flame. The metal chassis was twisted like a crushed soda can. For a moment, time suspended. Ash rained down like gray snow. Then the chaos rushed back in. Sirens, shouting, arms pulling her up. "Emma? Emma!" The voice cut through the ringing. Adrian was there. He had been in the lead car, 20 yards ahead. He had sprinted back into the smoke before the debris had even settled. He grabbed her, his grip bruising. His eyes were wide, frantic, scanning her body for blood, for shrapnel, for life. He was a man who usually commanded the world with a flick of his wrist. But in this moment, he looked like he was watching his world end. "Are you hit?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Answer me, I am okay," Emma stammered, coughing as the acrid smoke filled her lungs. "I am okay, I was not inside." Adrian pulled her against him. He crushed her to his chest, burying his face in her hair. And then, for the first time since she had known him, she felt it. He was shaking. The great Adrian Costa, the man of ice and steel, was trembling. His hands clutched her shoulders, his fingers digging into her coat, vibrating with the aftershocks of terror. It was a terrifying vulnerability. It told her, more than any declaration of love ever could, exactly how close she had come to dying, and exactly how much losing her would destroy him. "Get her in the other car," Adrian roared at his security team, his voice snapping back into command mode, though his hand refused to let go of her arm. "Move, now!" They sped away from the burning wreck, leaving the sirens behind. But the smell of smoke clung to Emma's hair, a grim perfume that signaled the escalation of a war she never asked to fight. 2 days later, the city of Gray Harbor felt like a trap waiting to spring. Emma was staying in the penthouse under total lockdown. The windows were bulletproof. The guards were doubled, and the silence was suffocating. She needed to breathe, against Adrian's orders. She arranged a brief meeting with her mother's doctor at a clinic near the perimeter of Adrian's controlled territory. She had security with her, 2 large men who stood by the door, but even they could not stop a badge. Detective Jordan Hale was waiting for her in the clinic lobby, and he looked haggard, his eyes rimmed with red, wearing the expression of a man who had run out of patience. "You look terrible, Emma," Jordan said. He did not offer a greeting. He simply stood in her path, blocking the exit. "I survived a car bomb." "Jordan," Emma replied, her voice brittle. "I think I'm allowed to look tired." "You survived this time," he corrected. "Next time. Costa might not be able to reshuffle the schedule. What do you want? I have nothing to say to you." Jordan reached into his coat and pulled out a thick manila file. He slapped it against his thigh. "We found Marco Cole. He said—" The name struck a chord. Ryan's cousin, the man Adrian had mentioned, the lieutenant in the Navarra crew who had likely ordered the kidnapping attempt. "Is he arrested?" Emma asked. Jordan let out a harsh, mirthless laugh. "No, he's at the morgue. We found him in a warehouse in the industrial district. He was tied to a chair. Single gunshot wound to the forehead. Point-blank range." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. It was an execution. "Emma." Jordan continued, stepping closer, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. "And it was not just business. The killer took his time. He wanted Marco to know it was coming. We have ballistics that match a custom caliber. We know it was Adrian. He did it to protect me," Emma whispered, the defense slipping out before she could stop it. "Marco tried to have me kidnapped." Jordan shook his head, looking at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "He did not do it to protect you. He did it to punish them. There is a difference. He's not a knight in shining armor. Emma, he's a butcher. And now that he has killed a high-ranking Navarra lieutenant, the retaliation is going to be total. That bomb under the car? That was just the opening salvo." He shoved the file into her hands. "Look at the photos. Emma, look at what your boyfriend does to people. And ask yourself if you can live with that blood on your conscience. Because it is there. He killed Marco Cole because of you." Emma took the file. Her hands were trembling. Jordan stepped back. "Run, Emma, while you still can, because the next time a bomb goes off, you are going to be in the car." Emma did not look at the photos until she was back in the safety of the penthouse office. When she finally opened the folder, she clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was undeniable. She sat there for an hour, staring at the evidence of Adrian's justice, waiting for the sound of the elevator. When the doors finally slid open, Adrian walked in. He looked exhausted, shrugging off his suit jacket and tossing it onto a chair. He loosened his tie, his eyes seeking her out immediately, as they always did. "I heard you went to the clinic," he said, his tone tight. It was risky. "Emma, We discussed this. Emma stood up. She picked up the file from the desk. She walked across the room and slammed it down on the glass coffee table between them. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. Adrian looked at the file. He didn't need to open it. He knew what was inside. "Detective Hale gave me this," Emma said, her voice shaking with a cocktail of fear and rage. "He says it is Marco Cole. He says he was executed." Adrian looked up at her, his face impassive. "He is dead." "Yes." "Did you do it?" she demanded. Adrian held her gaze. "I did." "Why?" "Because he ordered the men who grabbed you," Adrian said. His voice was steady, devoid of apology. "Because he sat in a bar 2 days ago and bragged to his associates about how he was going to finish the job. He said he was going to take you and make me watch while he hurt you." Emma flinched, the graphic violence of the threat hitting her hard, but Adrian did not stop. "I went to him. I made sure he understood his mistake, and then I ended him." Emma stepped back, horrified by the coldness of his confession. "Is this how it works? Every time someone looks at me the wrong way, you kill them? Is that the price of being with you? A trail of bodies? If they touch you with violent intent?" "Yes," Adrian said. He took a step toward her, his energy shifting from defensive to predatory. "I told you, Emma, I protect what is mine. He was a human being," Emma cried, tears spilling over her lashes. "So was Ryan. You cannot just decide who lives and dies because you are angry." "I am not angry," Adrian shouted, the sudden volume making her jump. "This is not anger, this is necessity." "Do you think the law protects you? Where was the law when Ryan pinned you in the alley? Where was the law when those men tried to drag you into a van? The law was filling out paperwork. I was the one who stopped them." Emma choked back a sob. She looked at him, this man who bought her mother's medicine, who held her when she had nightmares, who had stood in a rain-soaked alley and shielded her with his own body. And she looked at the file on the table. She took a breath, her chest aching with the pressure of the truth she needed to hear. "Why did you kill him for me?" she asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. She wasn't asking about the strategic value of removing a lieutenant. She wasn't asking about self-defense. She was asking about the weight of the act. She was asking why he, a man who viewed the world as a chessboard, had thrown caution to the wind to exact a personal, bloody revenge. Adrian stopped. He looked at her, his jaw clenching as he fought the urge to lie, to give her the sanitized version. He stepped closer, closing the distance until he was standing right in front of her. He looked down, his eyes dark with a storm of emotion that terrified and enthralled her. "Because he touched what is mine," he answered. The words landed like a physical weight. They were a confession and a brand all at once. It was not a statement of ownership like property. It was an admission that she was a part of him, a vital organ that had been threatened, and his reaction had been as instinctual as breathing. The air between them crackled. Emma stood wrapped in a storm of fear, anger, and a fierce, unwanted sense of safety. She hated the violence. She hated the blood. But God help her. There was a primal part of her soul that recognized the devotion in the act. No one had ever fought for her. No one had ever cared enough to burn the world down just to keep a scratch off her skin. Adrian raised his hand. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, waiting for her to recoil. When she didn't, he placed his palm lightly over her heart. He could feel it racing, a frantic bird against her ribcage. His thumb brushed the fabric of her blouse, pressing against the beat, somewhere along the line. He whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Protecting you stopped being strategy. It became personal. I cannot separate myself from you. Emma, if they hurt you, they kill me. So I kill them first." Emma looked at his hand on her chest. She covered it with her own, her fingers gripping his wrist. She wanted to push him away. She wanted to pull him closer. The conflict was tearing her apart. "I cannot be the reason people die. Adrian," she sobbed, "I cannot live like that, no matter what they did, no matter how bad they were. I cannot have that on my soul." "It is not on your soul," Adrian said fiercely. "It is on mine. I will carry it. I will carry all of it." "But it does not work that way," she cried, finally pushing his hand away. She stepped back, putting space between them. "We are connected. If you kill for me, I am part of it." She looked at him, her eyes searching for a lifeline. "If I asked you," she started, her voice trembling, "if I asked you to stop, to walk away from the revenge, to let the police handle Navarra, would you do it? For me?" Adrian looked at her. He stood in the center of the luxurious cage he had built, a king of a violent empire. He loved her. He knew that now. But he also knew the world he lived in. If he stopped, if he showed mercy, they would both be dead within a week. He opened his mouth to lie, to promise her peace, but he couldn't. He remained silent. The silence stretched, filling the room, louder than any scream. It was the answer. He chose her survival over her morality. He chose his war over her peace. Emma let out a shattered breath. She nodded slowly, the hope draining from her face. "I cannot do this," she whispered. Adrian moved then. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides. He didn't speak. He reached for her, and she didn't fight him. He pulled her into him, his hands fanning across her back, pressing her flush against his body. He lowered his head and captured her lips in a kiss that tasted of salt and grief. It was desperate. It was a goodbye. Emma clung to him, her fingers gripping the lapels of his shirt, pulling him closer as if she could merge with him, as if they could fuse together and escape the impossible choice between love and survival. It was hot with longing, a searing confirmation of everything they were losing. He held her as though she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world, his touch possessive, reverent, and terrified. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. Adrian rested his forehead against hers for 1 second, his eyes closed, memorizing the feeling of her. Then Emma pulled away. She walked to the bedroom. She didn't pack everything, just a small duffel bag, enough for a few days. Adrian stood in the living room, watching her. He didn't try to stop her. He knew that if he forced her to stay now, he would break her completely. "I am leaving." "Adrian," she said, standing by the door with her bag, "I am quitting the job. I cannot come back to the tower." "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice dead. "Somewhere safe," she said. "Somewhere away from this." "I will have men watch you," he said instantly. "No," Emma said. "If you send men, I will run further. Let me go, Adrian, please. If you love me, let me go." Adrian clenched his jaw until his teeth ached. It was the hardest thing he had ever had to do. "Go," he rasped. Emma opened the door. She looked back at him one last time, a dark, lonely figure in a tower of glass. Then she stepped out, and the heavy door clicked shut, severing the connection. Emma drove until her hands stopped shaking, which took nearly an hour. She found a nondescript motel on the northern edge of the city, a place with flickering neon signs and thin walls. It was the opposite of the penthouse. It smelled of bleach and regret. She threw her bag on the bed and sat down, burying her face in her hands. She had cut the tie. She was free. She felt like she had just carved out her own heart. She hoped the distance would break the spell. She hoped that in the silence of this cheap room, she could remember who she was before she became Adrian Costa's weakness. But unknown to Emma, the silence was deceptive. Across the city, in a dimly lit precinct office, Detective Jordan Hale was pacing. He had just received a tip from a confidential informant deep within the Navarra organization. Navarra was done playing games. They were done with car bombs and warnings. They were planning a final, decapitating strike. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala was in 2 days. It was the one event Adrian Costa appeared at publicly every year, a display of legitimate power and philanthropy. Navarra was going to hit the gala. They were going to turn the ballroom into a slaughterhouse to get to Adrian. Jordan looked at the file on his desk. He looked at the picture of Emma Romano. He knew he should warn her to stay away. He knew he should tell her to run to the next state. But he also knew that Adrian Costa was untouchable in his fortress. The only time he was vulnerable, the only time he made mistakes, was when it concerned her. If Emma was at the gala, Adrian would be distracted. If Emma was in danger, Adrian would expose himself. Jordan picked up his phone. He stared at Emma's number. He told himself it was for the greater good. He told himself that taking down the Costa syndicate was worth any price. He began to formulate a plan to use Emma Romano one last time. She wanted to save lives? Fine. He would give her a chance to save everyone by being the bait that finally caught the wolf. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel buzzed with the frantic, dying energy of a trapped insect. Inside room 12, the air smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner. Emma Romano sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, her eyes fixed on the small television bolted to the wall. She'd been here for 3 days, 3 days of silence, 3 days of trying to convince herself that leaving Adrian Costa was an act of survival, not an act of cowardice. On the screen, the local news anchor was smiling a plastic smile. Tonight is the annual Gray Harbor Children's Hospital Gala, the anchor said, a night of glitz and philanthropy. However, sources say that security is tighter than usual this year due to unspecified threats. Mr. Adrian Costa, the event's primary benefactor, is still scheduled to attend despite the concerns. The camera cut to a shot of the Grand Hotel, where sleek limousines were already beginning to arrive. Emma felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Unspecified threats, security concerns. In Adrian's world, those words were not vague warnings. They were a forecast of violence. She looked at the time. It was 7 p.m. The gala started at 8. A sharp knock on the motel door made her jump. Emma froze. She had told no one where she was. "Emma, open up. It is Jordan." She let out a shaky breath and unlocked the door. Detective Jordan Hale stood under the flickering walkway light. He looked worse than she did. His shirt was wrinkled, and there was a desperate, manic energy in his eyes. "You are hard to find," he said, pushing past her into the room. "How did you find me?" Emma asked, closing the door. "I am a detective." "Emma, you used your credit card at the vending machine." He turned to face her, pacing the small room. "We do not have time for pleasantries." "Tonight is the night. We are taking Costa down." Emma crossed her arms, hugging herself. "I do not want to hear it. Jordan, I left him. I am out." "You are never out," Jordan snapped. "Listen to me. We have the warrants. We are going to surround the Grand Hotel. We are going to arrest him the moment he steps off the stage, but we are not the only ones who know he will be there." "What do you mean?" "We picked up chatter from the Navarra wiretaps an hour ago," Jordan said, his voice dropping. "They are not planning to let him get arrested. They are sending a hit squad. They are going to use the chaos of the police raid to kill him." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "They will kill him," she whispered. "They will turn that ballroom into a shooting gallery," Jordan said. "And if Costa is blindsided, he is dead." "Why are you telling me this?" Emma cried. "Why not just warn him?" "Because if I warn him, he will go underground," Jordan shouted. "I need him there so I can arrest him." "But I do not want a massacre. I do not want him dead. Emma, I want him in a cell." He looked at her, his expression softening into something manipulative. "If you stay here, Emma, you are going to wake up tomorrow morning and read the headline that Adrian Costa was gunned down in a tuxedo. Is that what you want? Can you live with that?" Emma stared at him. She hated him in that moment. He was using her heart as a tactical asset. "Get out," she whispered. Jordan nodded, placing a card on the dresser. "If you change your mind, we will be on the perimeter." He left. Emma stood in the silence of the room. She looked at the television. The gala coverage was continuing. She thought of Adrian's hand on her heart, because he touched what is mine. He had burned the world for her. He had killed for her. And now, he was walking into a trap that would end him. She could not stay here. She could not sit in a motel room and let him die. She grabbed her bag. She didn't have much, but she had the black silk dress she had packed, the one formal thing she owned. She dressed with trembling hands. She pulled her hair back. She looked in the cracked mirror. She didn't look like a legal assistant anymore. She looked like a woman going to war. She dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "Sarah? It is Emma. I need a favor. A big one. I need a staff badge for the gala tonight." The ballroom of the Grand Hotel was a sea of diamonds and black ties. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, invisible in their uniforms. Emma was one of them. She had secured a server's jacket from Sarah, slipping in through the service entrance. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird as she moved along the periphery of the room, clutching an empty tray as a prop. She scanned the crowd, her eyes darting nervously. Every shadow looked like a gunman. Every pop of a champagne cork sounded like a gunshot. Then she saw him. Adrian stood near the center of the room, talking to the mayor. He looked devastating. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, his posture erect, commanding the space around him with effortless authority. He looked untouchable. But Emma knew he was the most vulnerable man in the room. She began to push through the crowd, abandoning her cover. She had to get close. She had to warn him. Adrian turned his head, as if he felt the weight of her gaze. Their eyes locked across 50 feet of crowded ballroom. Emma saw the shock register on his face. His mask of polite disinterest shattered. He stared at her, and for a second there was raw, naked relief in his eyes. He had found her, but it was instantly replaced by a flash of terrifying anger. He knew she shouldn't be here. He said something to the mayor, excused himself, and started moving toward her. His strides were long and purposeful. He was coming to get her. He was coming to get her out. Emma took a breath to shout, to warn him, but the air in the room suddenly changed. The service doors on the east wall burst open. It didn't happen in slow motion. It happened all at once. Men in dark suits stormed in, not with trays, but with automatic rifles. "Gun!" Someone screamed. The first shot shattered the crystal chandelier above the dance floor. Chaos erupted. Screams tore through the air. The wealthy elite of Gray Harbor dropped to the floor, overturning tables, scrambling for cover. Glass exploded. Emma stood frozen for a fraction of a second, watching the nightmare unfold. "Adrian!" she screamed, her voice lost in the cacophony. Adrian did not drop for cover. He moved. He saw the gunman, he saw the layout, and he saw Emma, standing exposed near the pillar. "Get down!" he roared, sprinting toward her. Police teams burst through the main doors, shouting commands, "Drop your weapons! Police!" The room became a crossfire. Bullets chewed into the plaster and velvet. Emma was shoved hard from behind by a fleeing guest. She hit the floor. Sliding across the polished wood, she scrambled behind a marble pillar, gasping for breath. She looked up. A gunman, separated from his group, was rounding the corner of her pillar. He raised his weapon, his eyes wild, locking onto her. He didn't care who she was. She was just a witness. "No!" Emma cried, raising her hands. A blur of black motion collided with the gunman. Adrian. He had crossed the distance in a reckless, suicidal sprint. He didn't have a weapon. He used his body as a battering ram, shoulder-checking the gunman with bone-breaking force. The gun went off as they crashed to the floor. A single, sharp crack. Adrian grunted, a sound of pained surprise, but he didn't stop. He drove his fist into the gunman's throat, silencing him, then grabbed the man's fallen weapon. He spun around, grabbing Emma by the arm. "Move!" he shouted. He dragged her up. He didn't look at the police. He didn't look at the Navarra hit squad. He looked only at the exit. He pulled her through a side corridor, kicking open a set of double doors that led to a small, private chapel attached to the hotel for weddings. He slammed the heavy oak doors shut and jammed a chair under the handle. Silence descended, heavy and sudden, broken only by the muffled sounds of shouting and sirens outside. The chapel was dim, lit only by votive candles. Adrian leaned back against the door, sliding down until he hit the floor. He dropped the gun. His hand went to his side. "Adrian," Emma dropped to her knees beside him. His pristine white shirt was no longer white. A dark, rapidly spreading stain of crimson was blooming just above his hip. "You are shot!" Emma choked out, her hands hovering, terrified to touch him. "Oh my God, you are shot! It is a graze!" Adrian gritted out, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. It passed through. "I am fine." "You are not fine," Emma cried. She ripped the hem of her dress, tearing a strip of black silk. "Move your hand!" She pressed the silk against the wound. Adrian hissed in pain, his head falling back against the wood of the door. "Why?" he rasped, his eyes finding hers in the gloom. "Why are you here? Emma, I let you go. I gave you an out. I saw the news." Emma sobbed, pressing down on his wound, her hands slick with his warm blood. "Hell told me Navarro was coming. He told me you were going to die. I could not let you walk into it alone." "You came to save me?" Adrian asked, a strange, breathless laugh escaping his lips. "You foolish girl. You walked into a kill box to save a monster. I came to warn you," Emma said fiercely. "I did not want you to die." Adrian reached up with his clean hand. He cupped her cheek, smearing a trace of blood on her skin. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. "You saved my life anyway," he whispered. "If I had not seen you, I would have been in the center of the room. I would be dead right now." Emma leaned into his touch, the tears falling freely now. "You took a bullet for me," she accused, her voice breaking. "You threw yourself in front of a gun. You are insane." Adrian looked at her with a clarity that pierced her soul. If anyone was going to bleed in that room, "Emma," he said softly, "it was going to be me. Not you. Never you." The sirens outside were getting louder. Heavy footsteps pounded in the corridor. Someone tried the handle of the chapel door. "Police! Open up!" Adrian winced, sitting up straighter. He looked at the door, then at Emma. "We are out of time," he said. He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me closely. Emma, there are two futures here. In one, the police break down that door. They arrest me. You testify. You walk free, and I spend the rest of my life in a cage. And the other?" Emma whispered. "In the other, you disappear with me," Adrian said. "Right now, there is a service hatch behind the altar. My men are waiting in the tunnels, but if you come with me, you are running forever. You carry the weight of everything I am, everything I have done, including Ryan, including Marco." He waited. He was giving her the choice again. But this time, the cost was laid bare in blood. Emma looked at him. She looked at the wound in his side. She realized there was no version of her life that wasn't scarred by this. She loved him. She would always love him, but she could not live in the shadows, running from the ghosts of dead men. "I cannot run." "Adrian," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I cannot live a life where I am always looking over my shoulder." Adrian's face fell, the light dying in his eyes. He nodded slowly. "Then I will surrender." "No," Emma said. She gripped his shirt. "I will not run with you," she said, "but I will not hand you to them. I will not let you die in a cell for protecting me." She looked at the door, which was shuddering under the blows of a battering ram. "Go," she whispered. Adrian stared at her. "What will you tell them?" "I will tell them the truth," Emma said, "that I was attacked, that you saved me. I will not lie for you, Adrian, but I will not condemn you either. I will let them fight over what that means. It was not absolution. It was not a happy ending. It was a messy, gray, painful compromise." Adrian looked at her with awe. It was the closest thing to forgiveness he would ever get. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was brief, hard, and tasted of iron. "Live, Emma," he commanded against her lips. He pulled away. He struggled to his feet, clutching his side. He looked at her one last time, a woman kneeling in a ruined dress, covered in his blood. Then he turned and vanished behind the heavy velvet drapes of the altar. Seconds later, the chapel doors splintered open. SWAT teams poured in, rifles raised. "Freeze! Hands in the air!" Emma raised her bloody hands. She was alone. 6 months later. The winter snow had melted, leaving Gray Harbor gray and wet. Emma sat at her desk in the small community legal clinic on the west side of the city. It was a far cry from the high-rise tower. The pay was terrible. The coffee was worse. But the work was honest. The city had changed. The Costa Syndicate had fractured after that night. Without Adrian, the leadership crumbled. The Navarra crew had been dismantled by the police sweeps that followed the Gala massacre. Adrian Costa was officially a fugitive. There were sightings, of course, in Italy, in Brazil, in Greece, but he was a ghost. Emma finished her paperwork and locked up the office. She walked home through the quiet streets. She didn't look over her shoulder anymore. She didn't have to. She reached her apartment building, a new place, in a neighborhood where no one knew her name. She walked up the stairs to the 3rd floor. She stopped. There was a white envelope slipped under her door. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She bent down and picked it up. There was no stamp, no return address. She unlocked her door and went inside, locking it behind her. She sat on her sofa and opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. It was a picture of a small, sun-drenched town on the coast of the Mediterranean. The water was a brilliant, impossible blue. It looked peaceful. It looked like a place where a man who wanted to be an architect might build something beautiful. There was a note. The handwriting was sharp, jagged, and unmistakable. For the moment in the chapel, for the moment you held my face and did not look away. And below that, a single line. No matter where I am, no one will ever touch what was mine again. Emma pressed the note to her chest. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she could feel the phantom weight of his hand over her heart, steady and possessive. She walked to the window. She stared out at the city lights of Gray Harbor, shimmering in the distance. She was alone. She was safe. She was free. But as she looked at the horizon, she knew that a part of her would always belong to the man who had burned the world to keep her warm. Their story was unfinished, a jagged scar on her heart that would never fully heal. But for now, she chose to keep living. She carried the ache of his absence and the undeniable, terrifying truth that someone had once loved her enough to bleed for it. "Thank you so much for listening to Why Did You Kill Him for Me?" she asked. The Mafia boss replied, "Because he touched what's mine." It has been a journey writing this story of danger, sacrifice, and complicated love. I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below where you are listening from. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more intense, emotional narratives. Don't forget to share your thoughts on Emma and Adrian's ending in the comments. Did she make the right choice? Until next time,